Everybody. Welcome to a Tuesday night author talk. I am Dina from Amityville Apothecary, and I will be waiting for Madame Pamita, and there she is. Hi, so awesome. I'm going to go live with you. Get an invitation. We'll see how it goes because I will tell you, when Mercury is in the microwave, things get weird. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. How are you? It's so
It's
nice to
great.
see you.
It's so great to see you. Look what I'm wearing.
Yay! Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I'm so happy you got it. So, hi, I'm Dina. I'm co-owner of the Apothecary. So excited to be with you tonight in the midst of the chaos that is the holiday season.
Right? Oh my gosh.
I'm like, I apologize in advance for any barking dog that goes on. I do this huge community gift exchange, and people have been collecting their presents. So we collect presents for people that just need some help, and so there's been a lot of just in and out of my house. So I'm like, this is a little, it's gonna be a little between Mercury and retrograde, which has been brutal. I don't know how your tech has been or what's been going on up there. There you go. I don't know where you are. I hope you just didn't drop out. You guys, you see, this is what I'm talking about with Mercury in the microwave, man. I'm gonna invite Madame Pamita back, and I'm going to. There you
I'm
are.
back again.
I was just talking about Mercury in
I
retrograde and how
know.
brutal it's been. I'm like, okay, shut up about it. Shut up
You
about it.
you just mentioned his name and Mercury showed up, right?
Yes, there he is. There he is. Of course, of course. Thanks. Let's just stop your troublemaking ways, sir. Anyway, it's so nice to see you. Thank you so much for taking the next hour to talk with us. Of course, we mentioned that we were going to be hosting you and then proceeded to sell almost all of your books out immediately. So the only one that I have in front of me right now is the book on Baba Yaga's book of Witchcraft, but the book of the your Cancer Witch and the Candle Magic book, we like sold out. Like that was, there you go. But I have my notes.
Okay, good. I've got all the books here. I've got
Perfect.
also Madame Pamita's Magical Tarot, the
Yes.
old version, and Magical Tarot, the new version. Baba Yaga. I've got them all here. So we're
Perfect.
all good.
Perfect. I'm glad you have them all because I'm like, I only have the one. I had them to the side. I was reading them. I have my notes, and then they wound up back on the shelf, and then they're home with somebody else. So as it goes. So I think before we get started and before we get into the meat and potatoes, as you should say, of all of your amazing books, and of course, I'm especially ready to talk about candle magic because that's my thing as well. I love it, although probably not as fantastic as you. I was so taken aback about your story about how when you were a young girl purchasing your first tarot deck in Salem. And if you want to share a little bit more about your journey and sort of that experience, I know probably a lot of people have heard it or maybe they haven't, but it's just such a great
Oh my
story.
gosh, thank you so much. I grew up in a quasi-magical household. We were Catholic growing up, but my mom is Ukrainian. I'm half Ukrainian. So because of that, in Slavic magic, a lot of folk magic existed even within Christianity. So I grew up in a household where magic wasn't forbidden as long as you were, going to church or
Right?
whatever. It was fine, right?
Yeah.
So, and it was also, because of my age, it was 1974 when I was 10 years old. So the whole satanic panic and that hadn't happened. My mom really didn't have too much truck with that anyway. But so back in the 70s, which was hippies, like
Mhm.
everybody was like hippie times, we went to visit my older sister who was living in Boston, and we took a little day trip out to Salem. And in 1974, Salem was not what it is now. Like there
Right.
was one witchy shop, which
Imagine
was,
one.
yeah, one. It's just hard to imagine Salem with one witchy shop,
Yes.
which was that groundbreaking pioneer Lori Cabot's shop. She had, it was, I looked at the timeline, and this would have been her second shop that she had that was there. I think she had one that was like for a year or two, and then she moved to another location. So we went into the shop, and my mom said, pick out a souvenir. And I picked out a miniature Rider-Waite deck at 10 years old. And she bought it for me. It was probably a couple bucks, a buck or two
Yeah.
at that time. Everything was much cheaper. But I think, like, I got home and I got very excited. I loved anything that was fortune telling, horoscopes, astrology, anything that I could get my hands on, even books about superstitions.
Yeah.
I would gravitate toward, because there was so little available unless you were an adult and really
Right.
into esoteric things, and probably ordering it out of a back of a magazine or something,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, so I took this little deck home or back to the hotel or wherever we were staying, and I was like, "Yay! I'm going to be able to tell fortunes." And then I looked at the little white book inside, and I was like, "Well, I guess I'm not going to be telling fortunes. I have
Right.
no idea." I mean, I still look at the little white book and go, "But
That book.
Waite's book."
I think that little white book is like the nemesis of most people that have ever purchased a tarot.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole history of that. I mean, if we go into that, because Waite wrote the book before they made the deck, and then Pamela Coleman Smith went off on a different tangent with her Pips
Right.
cards, for sure. So
Right.
sometimes the things don't even make any sense, but they
Yeah.
still kept it. So whatever. But that's neither here nor there. So I picked up the second. So I started playing with the cards like they were little paper dolls. Like, I'd make them talk to one another, and they'd have adventures, and I guess everything but the Eight of Wands and the aces has a person on it. So these people would be doing things, right?
Right.
So that's how I played with the deck when I was a little one. And then when I got to be in my teens, then I could find books and start studying and so on, and learning on my own. Then in my 20s, I started studying with teachers and so on. So that's the beginning of my tarot experience. But I say that experience of playing with the cards
Yeah.
has made me so intimate with the Rider-Waite Smith. That deck, I have dozens and dozens and dozens of deck, but that is the one that I go back to,
Yeah.
variations of the Rider-Waite Smith, because A, it's so incredibly
Yeah.
rich in the symbolism,
The
and
symbolism
B,
is
it's my
amazing.
old, yeah, and it's my old friends. So,
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with them, and I think I built this friendship by playing with them when I was a little girl.
That's
Yeah.
amazing though, because you're intuitive, just like, I don't really know what to do with these, but I'm going to make up these stories. It actually, when I was reading that, I think you told that snippet I read in the Cancer Witch book, I
Yeah,
believe.
I might have said it in there.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you said in
yeah.
the Cancer Witch. I was thinking about, we had Sasha Graham at the shop recently, and
I
she
love her.
told, yeah, amazing. She had told a story like, when you look at a children's book, like, look at the picture, tell me a story about the picture. And I was like, oh my gosh, why do we as human beings make things so much harder than they need to be, like, all the time?
Yeah.
And even in extending to our magical and witchy practice.
Like, I think in terms of that, that's exactly the way I teach. I teach people to play. Like I say, your first tarot class, I teach tarot classes. I do a cycle of 3 5-week classes once a year. And now we're moving into professional tarot. Next fall, I'll
Wow.
offer beginning again. But in doing the first class, I say to people, you can start reading in the first class, because at a sort of a very basic level, you can start reading by looking at the cards and telling a story. That's going to be your intuition, giving you information about that card. However, as you start becoming more interested in tarot, I think as a beginner, you just want to have that relationship with the cards. But then it's like, oh, you're intrigued with that. I want to find out what other people have to say. And I liken it to, like, if you have a friend at work and you're like, oh my gosh, this person's an amazing organizer. They're so good at organization, and you're good friends with them and you hang out with them and you just think of them as the organizer. And then you meet them outside of work and you go do something and you're like, oh my God, they're an amazing dancer. I didn't know they could dance, right? You find out something new about them. Or another person tells you, gosh, Susie is an amazing cook. And you're like, I never knew that.
Right.
So I think that's when we go to look at books. There is no Bible of the tarot. Not even A.E. Waite wrote the Bible of the tarot. Not Mary K. Greer, not Rachel Pollack, not Eden Gray. None of these people wrote the Bible of the tarot. They're giving their own well-informed information about the tarot, but it's really one person's take on it. Yeah, we could probably say that most cards, there's probably an umbrella where you're going to see similarities in people's descriptions of them. I mean, nobody's going to look at Ten of Swords as a love card. Right. Not a good one, right?
Right.
But we look at those cards and we can see them from different angles. And your view of that card, even when you're reading it completely intuitively without having any knowledge of the cards, is as valuable as somebody who's been a scholar. I have found in teaching, I learn so much. Like, I'll never forget one of my students in the first class, we were looking at the Fool card, and the student said, well, maybe that cliff is only 2 feet tall. We don't know what's down below. And I'm like, you're right.
Right.
So I learn from my students all the time. They observe things and see things. So I'm always open. And that's why, as a person who gets very easily bored with things and moves on to the next thing, I've been doing tarot in one form or another for 49 years. And that is because it is always unfolding, always something new. Never the same story twice when you do a reading. And always there's something more to learn, even with the same deck.
And I think, it's so funny that you said how, you come back to the Rider-Smith-Waite time and time again. And I find it so funny because I have a deck that I work with, which it's loosely based on, but the imagery is completely separate from the Rider-Smith-Waite deck. And there will be times where I will come to the card and look at it and say, hold on, I have to Google what does the Six of Wands look like in the Rider-Smith-Waite, because I can't, I need to look at Rider-Smith-Waite and then look at the deck and then put them together in a way that, again, because the art does inform your intuition, and that's why it's always so important when people say, I want to learn. We're like, well, you have to go and get a Smith-Waite or a Rider-Waite because you have to start there.
It's a great place to start. I mean, really, you can start with any deck, deck. But I teach with the RWS because I think it's going to be your best foundation. If you can have a connection with that deck, even if you don't really like the deck, you can move on to another deck because the vast majority of decks are based on it. And if they're based on it, you'll be in a good position, because if you look at that card and you're like, Six of Wands, I'm not really understanding this card, but I'll remember what the Six of Wands looks like, or look up what the Six of Wands looks like in the Rider-Waite-Smith, then you're going to be like, oh, I get it. So I think that's why I teach that deck, and I've written about that deck. My books, Magical Tarot and Madame Pamita's Magical Tarot, are about the Rider-Waite-Smith and how those cards in particular, to look at them in solutions orientation. That's the difference between my book and other people. I mean, there's many, many, many great tarot books out there. What do I have to contribute? Well, in my book, I look at what are these cards showing us, and what are the things that they bring us, and how does it help us to manifest and to do that work, that spiritual work. If you get a Tower card, the traditional meaning is a horrible disaster. But I look at it as, it's a card of the universe clearing out what needs to go. It's something is past its expiration date. Right. And if you don't clean it up, and if you see that card in the future, it's time for you to do some reflection and do some cleanup before the universe cleans up for you. So, yeah.
For the most part, I would say, if we're being honest with ourselves and we pull a tarot card, a card like the Tower, why do we fool ourselves? Most of the time we're fooling ourselves. We know where we're not being honest with ourselves in our lives, whether in relationship or in our own happiness or satisfaction or work life or whatever it is. I think a lot of times we, use the bombs of society, say, if I get the next thing or take the next vacation or what have you, things will be okay and fine. But we know when we're sort of, trying to pull the wool over our own eyes.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so it's not a surprise. So you're a Cancer. So
Mhm.
you are, you know, the Cancer voice of Cancer Witch. And I have a joke, like astrology isn't my strong suit, but having, owned a metaphysical shop for the past 5 years, I always say like I know more than the person just, reading the horoscope in the Sunday newspaper. But Cancer has always been for me the sign I know the least
What
about.
sign are you? A fire sign?
Oh no, I am a Libra sun with a Cap
Ah,
rising and a Leo moon.
oh, okay, okay. I was going to say sometimes fire and water are real, antagonists,
Yeah.
and it can be like opposites attract, or it can be you're completely disinterested in it.
I
You
just
know
think
what I
it's
mean? Too.
because
Or it can be,
yeah, no, I just think that because growing up, for whatever reason, not a lot of cancers in my family.
yeah,
So, like a lot of Virgo, a lot of Scorpio, and Leo. Those
yeah.
tend to be like the top three, but like not a ton aside from like not never a Cancer, not a Cancer in the family to be found. So, was so interested in reading your perspective as being a witch that's a Cancerian, because I don't really know so much about it, but I'm like completely intrigued about, you know, why don't you like about like water scrying and like the intuitive gifts of cancers and, ancestral connections and all that stuff. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that and maybe how those particular like brands of magic have shown up in your life, maybe for the fellow cancers that are out there.
Well, cancers are the cardinal water sign. So I'm an intermediate when it comes to astrology. I'm not like a person that can throw out a progress chart, but I do know enough about the signs and certainly about those big three and their influence on people and so on, because that becomes part of your work when you're working with someone, is to understand who they are. So with a Cancer, Cancers are cardinal, which means they're starters, but they're not so great at finishing things. But they're great at starting things. Cardinal signs are always the beginning of the season, and we know the beginning of summer lands in Cancer, so that's cardinal sign. Um, Cardinal water means that you're a starter. In water is about emotions and spirituality. I think of also kind of like emotions, because we could say fire signs are about emotions, but they're much more expressive
Mm-hmm.
emotions. And I think of water being much more internalized emotion. Think about something like the difference between passion and love. Yeah, they're two sides of this same coin, but passion is a very outward expression, and love and romance is very internal. Think about a performer. That's a very fiery energy versus somebody who's writing a poem at home. There's
Yeah.
this kind of like yin yang energy to water and fire. And so cancers as a sign tend to be carers and nurturers, very motherly energy. Even in masculine cancers, there's a very nurturing, caring energy. Like I think of the Cancer father being like the cuddly dad, right? Even, he's a protector, he's a provider, but he's also a cuddler and affectionate and kind and sweet. So cancers also tend to be quite psychic. I mean, the water signs have a natural affinity for psychism and spirituality, dream work, and all of that. Again, very internal stuff. Cancers can be described as being super moody. We're ruled by the moon. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny that we're moody, because think about the moon. It's like the moon is our most let's say, visible cycle that we experience in nature every single month, of it going from new moon all the way to full moon and back
Right.
again. And so just like the moon changes over that monthly cycle, we can see the cycles that happen in our emotions as a Cancer. And our work is to remember that whatever we're experiencing in the moment is not how it's always going to be. So if we're experiencing sadness, it's like sometimes we can go really into that sadness and think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be sad for the rest of my life. Not remembering that it's cyclical and that we will feel happy again. When we feel happy, we need to seize that beautiful moment and appreciate and witness that beautiful moment, because it's not going to be with us forever. We're going to feel another emotion. So Cancers get a reputation of being moody, but it's because we're ruled by the moon. Oh my God. It's like
so much change, constant cyclical change. Was there ever a point in your magical practice where you sort of put two and two together about, your practice, and then you're like, oh, as a Cancer, of course I have this intimate and intuitive relationship with the cards, and I'm able to have these relationships with the characters as they move through the journey. Like, was there ever, I love like these aha moments that we sort of come to in our practice. Did you ever have an aha moment when it came to your astrology? Because I'm still fighting with it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, because I really had that moment because I'm a Leo rising. And when I was in my 20s, I remember my friend who was an astrologer, an amazing Gemini astrologer, Yolanda Valenzuela. She's an amazing astrologer. And she did my chart, and she was freaking spot on about everything. But I was like, I would say to her, like, I'm not a Cancer. I'm not really a Cancer. I'm more of a Leo. And she's like, you're a Cancer in denial because you are a Cancer. Like, I just was so rejecting of all that squishy stuff. I love the exuberance of that rising sign. And I do think that maybe for me and maybe for some other people as well, your rising sign is how you express in the world. And I think you identify with your expression in the world when you're younger. And when you mature, you start really going inward and cherishing your inner self, who is your sun sign. I didn't cherish it when I was younger. I was like, whatever, Cancer is so a wet rag. I did not I want to be a Cancer. But now I love those things. So like another aspect, you brought up like ancestor work. Oh my gosh, Cancers love history. That's one of the things. And so I am always, one of my super passions, and shows up in Baba Yaga's book of Witchcraft, is going back, researching and finding the old traditions. Not that we have to go out and work in a field and do those things that people did 100 years ago, 150 years ago, but we can apply the understanding of those ancient ways to our modern times and adapt and express them, or just honor those traditions that our ancestors did. So
the keeper of the family traditions. I was going to say, absolutely, like, such a beautiful and important part of, I think, really poignant for now, because so many younger practitioners that are maybe like newer to the craft, or just getting interested in witchcraft, or metaphysical work, or whatever it is, esotericism. I totally just butchered that. Great. It's fine. Want to, especially like if you live in America, want to find where are their people from, and now that we have access to ancestry and DNA testing, which we didn't even have a decade ago. Or if we did, it was very expensive, and you weren't getting the results you're getting now. Right? Even in the I find it so funny. Have you ever done an ancestry or a DNA test?
Yeah. And it's so crazy. 23andMe not only located where my grandparents are from, but the secondary area that they gave as my home, like my DNA, is where those people were moved to.
Amazing.
So they could find where they were from and also where they had
Right.
moved to.
So
Now
like
they don't say that, but I know that that's the
right,
history.
but like as the DNA, like they have like those regions and they could see how it changes. It's really interesting
Yeah.
because so you didn't have any big surprises as to like what you thought you were and then what you came out to be.
Well, there was a little surprise on my dad's side, which is that he would always kind of say he was English, Irish, Dutch, Scottish mix. Like, that was his mix, right?
Right.
Um, but I was always like, you're Scots Irish. You're definitely, he grew up in a Protestant family in Tennessee. I go, there's no Irish in there. There's nothing. And then when we did the DNA, we did find out he was 30 something percent Irish. So there is, but it's like on the border of Northern Ireland. But so I was actually verified something that I was dubious.
That's actually,
So I don't know if it's new information,
it's
but
funny because when I did my entire, it's so funny. You talked about like going to Salem and, getting your tarot cards and having that whole experience. And, you're a skosh older than me, but I'm a child of the 70s and 80s too.
yeah,
And I, my whole life, like, somebody would tell you something, your parents would tell you something, and like that was the answer, right? So my
yeah,
whole
yeah,
life, I was half Italian and half German. And then my dad would say, and a little French, mixed in. And ironically enough, supposedly half Italian and half German on both my mother and my father's side, similar. So similar, supposed. And, really very interestingly enough, when I got my ancestry back, I was like 30% Scottish. Like literally, like what? We're like, what is this? Hardly any, no German from my father's side, only Germanic from my mother's side. And like more French and like weird, like very strange. And so what the weirdest part about this is though, that when I was in college, I was a history major, and like, I don't know, maybe I have cancer somewhere unknown in my chart because I also love history. And I wrote my honors thesis on Mary Queen of Scots.
yeah.
Like, right? So like you have these hunches, like I didn't even know, but like of course, here I am in like my early 20s doing this like deep dive into Scottish history and
It's amazing. It's amazing. I know even before all of that, when I was again in that same year that I got the tarot deck, we also went to Europe. We went to Boston to visit my sister, then we flew out of New York and we went to Europe. And I can remember it was my first trip to Europe, and going into England, I felt like something this land is speaking to
yeah.
me. And I could feel that even as a child. And I'd always, every time I could wrestle up some money as like a early 20 something, late teens, early 20s, I was flying off to England to go there and go to Scotland and I went to Ireland when I was 10. But just being in that land, how did I even know that that was there at that age? I didn't really know, but
Yeah, but you knew.
yeah, exactly. Like at the deep core level, your intuition is pulling you in a direction. And then you get that confirmation when you
Yeah.
then do your DNA and you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Right, of
That I
course.
did Mary Queen of Scots.
Of course. I know, so random. I know Danielle, my business partner, is on. She's very, very Irish. She's felt the same ancestral pull when she was in Ireland. It is amazing when you get on these lands. And interestingly enough, again, very small percentage, like maybe 9% French, like obsessed with France.
Yeah.
I like horrible French speaker, by the way, but just love France. Um, so you get your tarot deck, you start doing more training, you're reading in your early 20s. What's the sort of jump from to having your shop, being a writer? So like tell me more about your
Oh my
story.
gosh. I think, well, so I grew up in a household where we did magic. We didn't, they were spells like my mom would, all kinds of things. Like my mom told me things about what my grandmother did. My grandmother had already passed away by the time I was born, but she told me about these little hints and clues about what my grandmother was doing. And then, my mom would do things like we would make a wish. We would write a wish on a bay leaf and throw it into the fireplace, or we would, she would go to a wedding and she'd bring me back a piece of wedding cake and wrap it in foil and stick it under my pillow. So I'd dream about my future husband. I mean, we had all these like weird little things that we would do, but it was like, they were like folk magic, and it was not incompatible with, Catholicism. So, I was like, I was pretty young, and I can remember reading that witches would bow down, turn around 3 times and bow to the moon. And that's like what they would do. So I was a little kid, like going out in the backyard, like spinning around and then bowing to the moon. Like I thought, okay, that's going to make me a witch, which I guess it worked. I don't know.
Yes, it did. I mean, I guess it did work.
So I grew up with a household where we had fortune telling things and horoscopes and Ouija boards, and nobody really thought anything of them, or they were just like your kid's toy, right? So, so I was very, very comfortable with all of that stuff, but we weren't witches. Like I wouldn't call like that. Not what we. I mean, we would now in the terminology that we use now, but the terminology back then, which meant you were doing something evil or bad, or cursing people, or stealing your neighbor's cow's milk or whatever. Right. So then I was, kind of exploring different things. I think I was still kind of searching a lot, when I was in my teens, looking for what was my spiritual path. But I think that's another thing that's very typical of cancers, is that we are spiritual seekers. We need to have that. That's kind of like some kind of spirituality. I don't know if I've met many atheist cancers. If I do, then I don't know. I don't know any particularly that I can think of. Anyway, long story short, I was doing readings for friends and myself and my family, and I wasn't doing it publicly because this is very Cancerian. It was so precious to me, like my spiritual path and my tarot reading and my divination practice and all that was so precious to me that I did not want to share it with anybody outside of people that I really were my inner circle, because I didn't want someone judging me or saying you're stupid or you're bad at it or whatever, so it was very private.
So sensitive. So sensitive, Cancer.
Really, really, we are. But interestingly, different than a Pisces is sensitive. A Pisces is very sensitive, like you wound me. A Cancer is like more like I've got a tough shell, but inside I'm squishy. Yes. So we can be tough, or sure we can be tough, but we don't let you see our inner squishy side. That is very private. So like, if you look at my socials, I share things, but I kind of keep my private stuff private. I'm not one of those people that shares every detail of what's going on in my life publicly. I share it with my inner circle. Now my inner circle is, of course, my clients and my people that I work with. I share them with what's going on in my life if I'm having some issue that they need on a need to know basis. But so I was doing all this stuff, and then I started. I decided I was a musician and I play music. And so I did this vaudeville show where I was playing old time music from the 1920s. And I'm like, what can I bring to this that'll make it more fun? I want it to be like a vaudeville show, not just me performing music. So I got a little like pickup band together, and we did this thing where I had tarot cards, and each card had a song associated with it. And we'd have audience members at cabarets and whatever come up, they'd pick a card, I'd tell a silly little fortune. Oh, you picked the lover's card, you're going to meet a lover at a nudist camp, or whatever. Right. And then we'd sing a song about that card. So it was always random. It was always kind of fun, very much audience interaction. And this was like a big hit in the cabarets in Los Angeles. I had regular gigs all the time, and we were doing this. What happened was that I was doing tarot, but in a way that was very safe, right. Publicly. Oh, it's just funny. It's just a joke. It's just part of the show, whatever. But people would ask me, hey, can you do a reading for me, like a real reading for me? Or can you do readings at my party? And I'm like, okay, I mean, I know how to do a reading. So that's what started me offering those things publicly. Wow. And then what I found was when I got out with it, either people were neutral, they don't care about it, or they were super positive about it. But I didn't get the pushback that I thought I was going to get, or the judgment that I was so afraid of. So like exposing that squishy part was very daunting for me. But then when I did it, it just opened up everything for me. From there, I started a tarot reading business and teaching tarot. And then I had a shop. And my friend Judika Illis, who's also a Cancer, she said to me, "Hey, what are you writing right now?" I said, "Well, I'm working on a course for Love Magic, a Love Magic course." She's like, "Why don't you write a book?" I didn't know I could. Like, I didn't know that was possible. Yeah, come and write a book. She's the editor over at Wiser. And the result was this,
That's
Madame
amazing.
Pamita's Magical Tarot. So really, Judika is the godmother of that book, because without her, I don't think I would have had the ovaries to do it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But you know, it is so funny that sometimes we just need a little bit of permission to like just change our entire perspective and trajectory of everything.
It's changed everything for
Yep.
me. Like, I mean, I love writing. I'm working on a couple other books right now, working on some other things. But yeah, it's just like I wish that I'm trying to figure out my life to make my life just writing only. I'm trying to figure that out. Or teaching. The other thing I love and I'm super passionate about is teaching, but teaching classes. So I'm teaching classes all the time. But my number, my soul number is a 5, and the 5 is the Hierophant, which is on the major arcana, which is the spiritual teacher of traditional wisdom.
Oh, wow.
And when I was growing up, I was like, ew, it's a pope. Ugh, yuck, gross. Right. Now I love that card because I realize it's like the teacher, the guru, the one that's passing down the wisdom to the students so that the students can teach someone else, right? Pass that wisdom along.
I'm a 7.
A 7.
Yes, I'm a 7. So there you go. You know what? I love that. I love that, you know, just Judika saying, "Hey, why don't you make this a book?" You're like, "Oh, I could do this." And then how did the Candle Magic book is amazing because there are snippets of, I mean, I've been carving candles, not for like a long time, but a good amount of time. And I sat down with your book last week and I'm like, okay, this is great. This is great. Like there is amazing foundational knowledge in that book that you will come to and go to time after time. You know, so great. So what made you get into the candle magic? Was that something that you like sort of picked up along the way, or how did that journey come to be for you?
So in my 20s, I started practicing with a big coven here of women, and that's where I started sort of got like formal Wiccan training. I'm not a Wiccan anymore, but that's a foundation that I know very well, so because of that, that's when I started doing, well, I would say my first candle magic was when I was a toddler, when we go to church and you make a wish and you light a candle. That's candle magic. I mean, in a nutshell. But my first witchcraft, purely witchcraft candle magic happened in my 20s. And again, it was a super private practice for me. I didn't do it for other people. I did it for myself. I did it with my coven mates, and that's about it. But what happened is, if you can remember, and even still to this day, I'd say the vast majority of candle magic books are like recipe books. Mm-hmm. They're like, okay, like Buckland's book. It's a great book, but it's a recipe book. So it's like, here, put the black candle in the position of the east and the white candle in the position of the west, and put these 3 moving candles. He tells you what to do, but he doesn't explain anything about it. So you're just kind of beholden to the person who is not explaining the spell. They have all the knowledge. Why a black and white candle for the equinox, let's just say, why are we doing this for the equinox? Well, it's because there's the night and the day or whatever. He's not explaining that.
Right.
So what I wanted to create was a really foundational, like you said, foundational reference book that would take you from very beginning. Like if you've never done a candle spell before and you're not sure how to do it and you don't know what to do, it would take you there, but then take you all the way through into very advanced candle magic in ways that I don't even see them really this information being shared. So I love sharing and empowering people in my teaching to be able to create for themselves. So with this book, you're going to be able to create. It's not like you go, oh, I'm going to look up the prosperity spell and I'm going to do it.
No.
You're going to be able to create your own prosperity spell because you'll know what colors to use, what herbs to use, what day to light your candle or what timing to light your candle, how many candles should you use, should you do a layout. I mean, it gets very
it's very thorough.
Advanced. Yeah.
So it's great. I mean, it's really, I think that's the beauty of what you did in that book, because it isn't just recipes and following it. It gives you the information so you understand how.
Yeah.
And why.
Yeah. And in my past, I had a boyfriend who was a chef, and I saw how differently a chef works in the kitchen than me. I would get out a recipe book. I would gather all the ingredients. I would measure them out, and then I would make the recipe, and then there was done. He would look into the fridge and go, okay, this is what we're going to have tonight. And bippity boppity boo, he made an amazing dinner. And I was like, oh, that applied then. I took that knowledge, like, oh, you can just go into the fridge. At a certain point, you know how to do all the things. So you can look at all the ingredients and kind of put it together. And so what this book is like, instead of a recipe book, it's a book to make you a chef,
right. And that's magic. It's so funny when people ask me like what type of craft I practice. And I always say I practice craft like I cook. And coming from like that Italian tradition, it's literally like, what do we got? What are we going to make? And then like, oh, I don't have this, but I have this. This will do. Right. And it is.
Italian cooking is a great analogy because Italy itself, it was a bunch of principalities. It wasn't like until like very recently was a bunch of different city states, right?
Late 1800s.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so, from Napoli, you're going to have a different recipe than Milan, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at like those regional differences, we know that in magic, this is the thing. Everybody's looking for like, what's the one true path about anything? And I think we have this programming from the religions that were brought up amongst that there's one, this is the one true, da, 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 da. In witchcraft, there are, I kind of want to say, you make the rules, really. In my opinion, it's your ethics that make the rules. It's your understanding. So the result is you have to educate yourself. You have to learn these things, but you get to play with them in ways like where, people sometimes are like, what's the strongest spell? That's not how magic works.
Right.
It's not like I'm gonna hold out and not give you my strongest spell. I'm like, well, you can add elements and more customize it. That can make a spell stronger. But in magic, it's like you get to, like the going into the kitchen when you're a very conversant in Italian cooking. And you can go, okay, what have we got here? Like I can take wherever I am and whatever I have around me and turn it into a spell. Like I can do that because I've done so many spells. I know how to do that. So the key is to do a lot of spell casting of all different kinds. You'll find what your jam is, but you'll also figure out that you can make magic with everything and nothing.
And I think too, going back to your intuitive Cancer Witch self, there's something also to be said for opening up your cabinet, your witch's cabinet, your apothecary cabinet, whatever it is, and having your intention for what spell you want to craft and having the ingredients sort of call to you.
Yeah. Because
a lot of times, if I'm opening if I'm working on a candle and I'm looking, for herbs or to feed my candle, I'm like, what the correspondences, but then sometimes you get these whispers of feeders or ingredients or just something that's just a little bit different.
Yeah.
Something that you might not have done before.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think when we look at like people get very obsessive about things that are, and I think it's like the collector syndrome, where people want the rare
Yeah,
Pokemon or whatever,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
they want to use some herb that's super rare, maybe even endangered, and they want that one for their spell. And I'm like, okay, you want that particular one for your love spell. Do you realize that there are 50 herbs, some of which are in your kitchen cabinet,
Cabinet.
that you
Right,
can use? Each one has a subtle difference, and you'll get that as you work with them more and more and you study and learn them more and more, like the difference between, like, for example, a pink rose petal and patchouli. Both can be used for love, but I think of a pink rose petal being very much more about the heart energy, and patchouli is very sensual and about the physicality. That's something that you get maybe from learning and reading, but also from experience of
right.
working with those. So, this obsession with like, I must have the rarest, most expensive, most hard to get plant. I'm like, all plants are magical. You only have 1,000 maximum in any given encyclopedia. I don't even think
Right.
1,000,
No, magic
500
pen.
maybe.
Yeah.
And yet, does that mean the other 300,000 plants species in this world are non-magical? Of course they're magical. It's like you have this new territory that you get to explore. And even, there's 10 magical topics in the world, just like there's 10 stories in every movie. It's one
Right.
of 10 stories, right? You just change the costumes and the kind of
Exactly.
something about it. But, so, there's going to be 100, if not, more than 100 different herbs that can be used in a love spell, in a money spell, in a protection spell, in a banishing spell. There's just lots and lots of things that can be used. And then your skill will guide you into like, oh, the subtle differences between, oh, I could use alfalfa in that money spell, but I could also use blue flag root. And I'm kind of feeling like the blue flag root is calling to me intuitively, like you said, or I
Mhm.
know from my experience that it's what I'm supposed to be working with. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's amazing to just and I think that's what's so great about your candle magic book is that it gives you the knowledge so you could start trusting yourself to allow yourself to make these decisions. And look, like you said in your book, you try something, it doesn't work. Okay, that one isn't, burning the way you wanted it to. Let's try something else. It's so funny because I needed to have that reminder. I have a physical location. Hadn't, we usually have a money candle going and a protective candle going someplace in the shop at any given point in time. And I decided to change up the money candle and sat it on our front altar, started burning it, and it started burning like crap. Huge wall, the wall of the candle was facing the register. And I looked at it and I said, Jesus Christ. So I'm like that. So Angie, one of our workers in the shop, she's amazing, young witch, so talented. And I said, Angie, look at this, it's burning like shit. I said, do me a favor tomorrow morning, dress it on crossing candle and put it on that side. So she did it. Sunday morning, I came in the next day. Wouldn't you know that candle's burning beautifully now?
Yeah.
Just like amazing. And it's so great. Like instead of me just perseverating, looking at the candle, and be like, it's burning like crap. Why is it burning like crap? Oh my God, it's burning like crap. I was like, okay, like
Get in
let's
there and
add to
fix it. Get
right.
in there and fix it.
Let's add to it, right? Let's fix, like, what can we do? And I
Yeah.
was like, it's just again, going back to giving permission or just reminding us things that we can do. We all need these like little reminders, and we're always learning and adjusting, and that's why it's called craft, right? Because we're
Yeah. Yeah. We're crafting. And I think that's the other thing. It's spell
yeah.
work. It's not spell sit and watch. It's like,
Yeah.
we're participants in our magic. If you have, this is what I say to people, if you have put in the energy and effort into a spell and your spell is going wrong, Fix it.
Yeah.
If your wick is drowning, pour off some wax or cut a little channel. Like, don't just watch your candle flame drown and go, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to get that thing. Why would you go, why would you run 26 miles of the marathon and then the last 0.2 miles, you're like, well, I guess I'm not going to make it. You know, that's what I feel it's like, right?
Right, just fix it. You're right. But, you know, so many times we look at it, we're like, oh boy. You know, and I get it all the time. You know, I dress candle for people and ship them all over the place, and people like, it's tunneling. I'm like, do you have a window open? Do you have a fan on? Like,
Yeah.
let's have the conversation first. Like, did you dress it yourself? How much oil and crap is in this candle? Because, you know, my candle, the glass broke. I'm like, you put too much shit in it.
I know, exactly. My pet peeve. I mean, you see gorgeous, gorgeous candles and they've got like a half pound of like herbs on top of them. And I'm like, oh shit. I know it's going to happen there.
The light on fire, the glass is going to crack, and everybody's going to.
And then everyone's going to be like, I'm cursed.
I'm cursed.
Oh my God.
I have a curse. We're like, no, you just superheated the glass.
Yeah.
It's really funny, but I think, you know, again, so super important to have these reminders as, you know, we're all practicing and learning and crafting, and like, as you said, active participants. So you guys, we chatted down and we have a couple of minutes. So if anybody has any questions for Madame Pamita, or something that you're interested in or want to ask, please shout your questions in the comments. And while we're talking and finishing up our chat, I'll read those out and we can have those answered. So you're working on some more books. You want to lean into just writing and teaching as your
my super passion. I mean, I love all the things. We make candles here. We make oils. We make all kinds of stuff that's like tools, you know. And when I was first making candles, there were no beeswax candles of magical candles. You couldn't find them. And there were it was difficult to find any shaped candles. Like the whole reason I got started, I mean, with everything I do it because it doesn't exist in the world and I feel like it needs to exist. So like the candle magic book, I didn't feel like there was a book out there that gave you the skills to craft your own spells. So I wrote that book. The tarot book I wrote was because I felt like there was no book that really expressed how these cards that are difficult cards could be useful, or how we use these tarot cards for magic, you know. And Baba Yaga's book of Witchcraft, because there's nothing about Ukrainian magic or Slavic magic.
Right.
And we have a question.
Yes.
I just saw.
Yep. Danielle says, do you think Baba Yaga is an evil character, or does she have a different purpose and personality to the lore?
Okay, so you have to understand with Baba Yaga, you have to go back into history and understand what conquering, you know, who writes the history, the victors write the history, right? So in the Slavic lands, in Kievan Rus, which is the center of like Slavic culture really in that part of the world, there were Vikings, there was pagan practices, there was a huge belief in spirits. There were spirits of the forest, spirits of the home, spirits of the yard, spirits of the water, everything, spirits of the air. Everything had a personified spirit. So she was the forest grandmother or the forest mother, but she was a crone, powerful, and an old woman. All right, 988 comes along and the king decides that he's going to ally with Bulgaria. So he marries the Bulgarian princess, or the prince marries the Bulgarian princess, but on the condition that he converts to Christianity. He doesn't care. So he's like, sure, I'll convert to Christianity. And so he and his wife get married. There's this great alliance. And now the Slavic lands are meant to be Christian. We're going to pass that down. Now we have all of these, monks coming in who are like, okay, now we're in charge. So the first thing that they do is they convince, the nobles and the educated people, this is what you need to do to follow this. It's fashionable now. Okay, we're going to follow that. But the peasant people were like, we've been pagans. We don't see any reason to become Christians. There's no reason. We've been practicing working with our spirits and we're happy with that. well, we don't want to convert. Well, okay, so we're going to find an icon next to your sacred spring, an icon of Mary. That means that your water gods, your spring goddess, your water goddesses are approving of Mary. So now you can worship Mary. Okay, all right, I guess. Okay, now we have to take your gods and goddesses and convert them into saints. Well,